Hello everybody, today's topic is Excel formula writing, where I'm going to explain and simplify how to write your Excel formulas. Now, I approach Excel formula writing a little bit different because I treat formula writing as though it were another language. So I'm going to be focusing on how to read and write Excel formulas, and we're going to be approaching it from the standpoint of formula literacy. Now, what I mean by formula literacy is this. When you first learned English, the first thing that they gave us was a set of symbols, and they called those symbols the alphabet, right? And we had to learn how to use those symbols, what those symbols mean, what they sounded like, punctuation, numbers, all of that, right? Then they showed us how to rearrange those symbols to make words, and those words we then called vocabulary. Then we learned how to rearrange the words to make phrases, and of course those phrases were called grammar. So between alphabet, vocabulary, and grammar, we became literate. Now once we became literate, we then spent our time adding more and more vocabulary words to our vocabulary list, and that therefore caused our grammar to become more and more complex. But eventually we got to the point to where we were actually we were actually fluent in our literacy. And that's the goal for your Excel formula writing. You're going to continually add quote unquote vocabulary words to your formula writing so that you can take this literacy that I'm going to show you, and you'll continually build on it and build on it and build on it until you become fluent in your formula writing. Now, before we dive in, I need to clarify some terms with you, all right? Now, this looks a little bit like math, but I don't want you to get afraid of it, all right? Because this is the math that we learned in elementary school, and I just want to remind you what some of the terms are here. So, remember back in the day, they taught us that 2 plus 2 equals 4, that this was called an equation. And the reason that this was an equation is because of the presence of this symbol right here, the equal sign. Whenever the equal sign is present, you know you're working in an equation. Now, there were instances where we were working with the equal sign not present. We were only working with what was on one side or the other side of the equal symbol. I don't know if you guys remember, it would be like 2 plus 2 would be on the left column, and then 3 plus 1 would be on the right column. And do you remember down the middle, we used to have to write whether it was equal or not equal to or greater than or less than? Remember that exercise? So, what was on the left side of the equal symbol? What was on the right side? Let's talk about that. On the left side of the equal symbol, whatever phrase you have there, we are going to call that an expression, all right? And formula writing is all about you writing an expression, all right? Now, an expression can be broken down into two major components that are always present. The first component is made up of these numbers that I have here, and I'm using 2 for both numbers. And these 2's are called values. So values are the pieces of data that you're actually working with, right? It's the data you're actually working with. If this was fruit, it would be the apples and the oranges, right? But the values are the pieces of data you're actually working with. And what you do to that data is controlled by this part right here, this component of your expression, which is called the function. So in other words, we use the function to impact the values so that we can get this over here, which of course is the answer. Some of you might have been overthinking where I was going to go with that. Yeah, that's just the answer, all right? So we use the function to impact the values or manipulate the values so that we can produce an answer. So realize that if you don't need an answer, there is no reason for you to do math. All right, just so you know. Okay, so these terms, the reason I bring this up is because I want you to know that Excel uses all these terms as well. And you'll see these terms inside the Excel program, and I want you to know they mean exactly the same thing in Excel as they did in elementary math, okay? They mean exactly this that you're seeing here, okay? Now, there's another aspect that I want you to know about formula writing. So, I would ask my students, can somebody please volunteer and read this to me out loud? And my students would say 2 plus 2 equals 4. And I would say, great. Now I'm going to add something to this slide, and I want you to read that out loud as well. So this is what I would add to the slide. And then my students would say 2 plus 2 equals 4. And I'd be like, great. Now the reason I would have them read it out loud is because I then make the point that what I have written here is actually written in 2 different languages. So if you can take for a second and imagine that mathematics is its own language as well, then I have written this in English and I've written this in mathematics. All right. However, when I ask you to read either one of them, you read it in English. Why is that? That's because when you learn a second or third or fourth language from the one that you first learned, which I'm calling your primary language, you will tend to translate any language that you learn after you learn your primary language. You will translate it back to the way you understand it in your own language. So it's kind of like when you're on vacation and you're trying to learn that new language and you're in, the first thing you think is, I gotta go to the bathroom. That's the first thing you think in English. And then you have to translate to say, where is the bathroom, right? You translate it to the second language, all right? So I want you to realize it's the same thing here with Excel. Everything that you write in mathematics, everything you write in Excel should be able to translate back to a normal English sentence. So here's what I teach my students. You first need to know in English what you're trying to do in Excel, and then you're going to translate it from English to Excel. So you have to be clear what you're doing in English. You have to be able to tell me 2 plus 2 equals 4 in English before you will ever be able to translate it and write it in Excel. So translation is a big part of formula writing. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this 2 plus 2 equals 4 as my consistent example throughout this entire training. And the idea is, since we all understand 2 plus 2 equals 4, let's start with that. And I'm going to make one change at a time as we continue until we finally arrive at what it's supposed to look like in Excel if we wanted to do 2 plus 2 equals 4. So I'm going to really break this down. So here's the first thing that I want you to know, all right? If I write 2 plus 2 equals 4 in mathematics, right? I could also write it this way, couldn't I? I could easily write 4 equals 2 plus 2, all right? Now, here's the thing though. I want you to know that Excel will not allow us to write it in both ways. Which way will Excel allow? Excel will only allow us to write it in this direction, 4 equals 2 plus 2. That means that we have been taught in mathematics to put our expression on the left side of the equal symbol, but in Excel, Excel's requiring that we put our expression on the right side of the equal symbol, and the answer is going to be what's on the left side of the equal symbol. So Excel wants the answer first, then the expression on the right side of the equal symbol. That's what Excel wants, okay? Now, because Excel wants this creates a problem for us because we read from left to right, correct? So the problem is, as we read from left to right, we first encounter the answer. How would we know what the answer is if we read from left to right if the answer comes first? All right, there's no way we would know that that's a 4 if we have not yet read equals 2 plus 2, right? So the problem is we don't know the answer, so how can we read the answer first the way Excel requires? Well, because of that truth, we work not with the actual answer, but with an answer placeholder. So we have to make a placeholder for the answer in order for us to understand how to write in Excel. So in English, in other words, it would be the unknown answer in this placeholder equals 2 plus 2. Okay? So realize that whenever we refer to the answer in formula writing, we're really talking about the answer placeholder, which is where the answer will be once we're completely done writing our formula. Now, here's an example of what I mean, okay? I'll show you an example of me writing this 2 plus 2 into Excel. So from here, I'm first going to choose a cell where the answer goes, all right? And then from here, I'm now just going to write equals 2 plus 2. All right. And then I'm going to hit enter keyboard shortcut Control Enter keeps me on the same cell. So that's a nice little trick there. And you see that it works. It actually gives me 4. So it does work. The unknown answer equals 2 plus 2, and it does translate to a regular sentence that is grammatically correct. So this is how Excel requires us to write. However, I do want you to know that this is not the proper way to write a formula. Now, I'm not saying that it's the wrong way to write a formula, but I'm just saying that in Excel, there's a proper way to write, and then there's a formal way and an informal way to write. So this is the informal way to write formulas. So I'm going to call this slang when we write like this. Excel does understand it, but this is not where we're going to stop. We're going to continue on until you learn the proper formal way to write a formula. Okay? So the next thing about Excel is that Excel does not want you to put the values in the formula. Now remember, the values are the actual data that we're working with, right? So in our case, we're working with the 2 and the 2. So Excel says, I do not want you to put the 2's in the formula. So how do we write the formula without the actual values? We're going to reference those values. We're going to put those values in other cells, and we're going to reference the values as cells so that it now reads the unknown answer equals C3 plus F5. And of course, we're assuming that in C3 and F5, there are the numbers 2 in those cells. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so I would choose another cell. This is where the answer goes, and I'll say instead equals, and then I'm now going to choose C3. I'm going to type that in there, plus F5. All right, and you can see that I'm choosing those cells because they both have the number 2 in them. And why we do it this way is because it's much easier to change the data in a formula by changing it directly in a cell versus trying to go in and edit every formula. So this is why we reference, so that we could easily change our data and have it automatically update formulas without us having to go in and change the formula itself. So no values in the formula, references only. In our example, the unknown answer, we typed in C3 plus F5, and that's how we got our answer. Okay, now here's the next topic. The next topic is this. Do you remember from your math days where we would get problems like this? 2 plus 3 times 4. Okay? Now, realize that we would work this problem from the left to the right, and that the problem could continue going, couldn't it? It could be 2 plus 3 times 4 minus 7 plus 9. Like, it could continue going, and we would just keep working the problem from the left to the right. All right. But then as we continued on in our math growth, it then became this. And in this one, remember, we had to do the 2 plus 3 inside the parentheses first, and then we would do the times 4. Okay. So I want you to know that this was arithmetic, and arithmetic is the easiest math to learn, but it is also the most limited math to use. So when you're using arithmetic, does Excel understand arithmetic? Yes, it does, right? However, there's not much that you can do by way of analysis using simple arithmetic. So what we did in math, and I wish somebody would have explained this to me when I was a kid, we relearned math completely from scratch in a completely new language called algebra. Now, algebra was more complex than arithmetic, so algebra could explain more, but algebra still couldn't explain everything. So, by the way, we then went on from algebra to even a more complicated math language called trigonometry, and then trigonometry was more complicated and could explain more, but still not everything, so we continued on and went to calculus. And then calculus was the most complicated of all, and calculus, turns out, is the only one that could explain to me how to make my spiral staircase in my dream home, because trigonometry couldn't do it, algebra couldn't do it, and arithmetic most certainly couldn't do it. So we do have multiple math languages, so to speak. So of these languages, which is the one that Excel prefers? You probably have figured this out. Excel wants the algebra, not the arithmetic. Now, Excel does understand the arithmetic, but Excel prefers the algebra over the arithmetic. So with that said, you can see that what we have here so far is arithmetic, but let's rearrange it a little bit and make it into algebra. Now, right now, this says the unknown answer equals C3 plus F5, okay? But I'm gonna move that plus symbol to the front, and then now this would actually read the unknown answer equals the sum of C3 and F5. So now I'm introducing new punctuation here with this comma that actually means the word and. Now C3 and F5 now says the same thing but in algebraic expression. And just so you know, this comma that means and could be substituted for a colon, and a colon would mean through. So I could say C3 and F5, or I could say C3 through F5 and include all the numbers in between, all right? So again, adding punctuation, adding more alphabet to our language here. So Excel prefers that you move away from the arithmetic and start writing with algebraic expression, which means we now are working with parentheses and therefore PEMDAS, all right? That P in PEMDAS, order of operations, that P stands for parentheses, okay? Now, there's one last thing that we need to change because Excel does not like for us to use this symbol here. So instead of us using this symbol, we're going to change it to the actual function, which is called sum. And now we have the proper way to write the formula. The unknown answer equals the sum of C3 and F5. The answer is present. The equal sign is present. Sum represents the function, and the values are inside of the parentheses. So the 4 steps to writing a proper formula would be: first, manage where the answer goes. All right, you've got to choose a placeholder. Now, once you choose that placeholder, the second thing is type the equal sign. All right, that one's the easiest step of all. All formulas start with equal. All right, now from there, you then have to choose your function. Now, this is the part that is going to keep you busy for the whole rest of your Excel life, right? Because you're going to continue to add more and more functions to your vocabulary list. And as you learn more and more functions, you will be able to say, read, and write more in the Excel language, right? You'll be able to do more because you have more functions in your vocabulary list. You understand how they work. Then, of course, every function is going to come with a set of parentheses, and inside of the parentheses are where the values will go. And each function will come with its own grammar that you'll have to follow in order to put the values inside the parentheses in the right way. So that is what completes your formula. Now let me give you a demonstration of writing our 2 plus 2 equals 4 in the proper way. So we're back to my Excel spreadsheet here, and here I'm going to click in a cell. I'm going to say equals, and then I'm going to type the function here. Okay, so from here I type equals, and then now I'm going to type out the word sum. Now what's cool here is you can see that Excel is so excited that we're doing this in the proper way that Excel starts actually suggesting functions for us. And you'll also notice the definition is showing up there as well, that's telling us exactly what this function will do for us. Now remember, every function comes with its own set of parentheses. So immediately type open parenthesis, and you'll see now the pop-up that shows us the grammar template. Here's a pattern that we have to follow. Now the first thing it's asking us for in bold is number 1. So we're going to type in number 1, which is C3. And then right after C3 is that comma that means and then number 2, which is in the square brackets. Those square brackets are just telling you that number 2 is optional. So if you don't have one, it's okay, right? The formula will still work. But we do have a number 2, so we're going to type in F5. then we're going to close parentheses. We're going to do our keyboard shortcut, Control Enter, and that's going to leave our answer in the same cell, leave our selection on the same cell, and you see that is the basics for how to write a formula. So that's all I have for you today, and please take a second, like, subscribe, and definitely ring the bell for more videos that I'll be uploading. I really appreciate all of you and my students, and please feel free to comment, feel free to share this video, and look for more videos from me where I am talking about my unique perspective about software and about life. All right, so thank you all. Until next time.